Hey guys, it's Ashley Maltz, integrative medicine physician at West Holistic Medicine and the founder of Austin Wellness Collaborative. I'm here for another session of the Corona series for Parasympathetic Reset. And for that, we have enlisted Dude Spellings, one of the AWC official members, who is going to take us on a parasympathetic activating journey. And dude, go ahead and tell us everything about yourself, how your journey and how you got to be where you are right now.
Sure.
And how people can find you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess before I forget, I'll mention that part.
Yeah.
So I teach an online course called the Primal Reboot Camp. And I have the domain primalrebootcamp.com, and you can find me on Facebook at Primal Reboot Camp as well. So my health journey, I have always been interested in health, but like a lot of people, kind of in that midlife area, kind of fell out of a lot of my health practices, found myself 50 pounds overweight and with a thrown back laying on the gym floor one day. And I hadn't even worked out. I was stretching, getting ready to work out. And I drove home and told myself, not going to do this, not going to be the guy with the bad back, and determined to figure out how to fix it. And that led me on a journey where I lost weight. I changed my lifestyle. I changed a lot of things that I was doing, and really embraced what I would call the ancestral living lifestyle. I got a health coaching certificate from the Primal Health Coach Institute, which, if you're familiar with Mark Sisson, that's his organization.
Yeah. Can you tell people what the primal lifestyle is?
Yes, absolutely. So, so if you've heard of paleo, it's similar to that. And the reason they call it ancestral is because we believe that living as close to our ancestors and the way that they lived and the way that nature sort of molded our existence back before we had computers and central air conditioning is, that's the way that our bodies are designed to operate. And that would, and probably I think the centerpiece of that would be the paleo diet or the primal diet, where you avoid processed foods and notably the one thing that's kind of hard for people with paleo primal is giving up grain and wheat, which is bread, pasta, pizza, a lot of stuff people like. But that actually kind of plays into the parasympathetic activation for me. I noticed I quit grains and wheat, and immediately lost additional weight. I had already lost some just from calorie restriction. But the most notable thing for me was that all of my allergies went away. My skin irritations went away. I used to get poison ivy. I play a lot of golf, so I used to get poison ivy like 4 times a summer, walking around in the woods looking for my lost ball. And as soon as I cut out the wheat and grains, all that went away. And it's my belief that the wheat and grains kind of kept me in a heightened sympathetic state, so that anytime even the slightest irritation came along, my body was on high alert already. And so I had a severe reaction. And I haven't had poison ivy now in about 5 or 6 years. And I used to get it 5 times a summer. Yeah.
Wow. Sorry, I was muted.
That's okay.
Because I have my dogs here and I don't want, if they start to bark sometimes. So.
Yeah. And it's hard to say, what, as there's no, there a lot of times there's not one thing that you can point to that has fixed the problem, right? And I tell people all the time, I might teach in my class, and I have, about 40 different lifestyle things that I teach. And a lot of times I will be halfway through the material and somebody will say, well, like drinking filtered water, does that really move the needle? And the way I explain it is, when I threw my back out, I couldn't squat down. I went to the chiropractor and physical therapist, and they put me through these tests, and I couldn't squat down. So let's say over the course of 20 years of desk sitting, I lost 20 centimeters of range of motion. So that's 1 centimeter a year, or 1/365th of a centimeter per day. Do you notice losing 1/365th of a centimeter per day? You don't. And that's kind of how all of the practices I teach kind of fit together. It's like there's not one thing that really is the linchpin. They all fit together and contribute to something bigger.
I hear that. I see that in my practice all the time. So, every little bit helps. And it's okay to divert every now and then. And, you don't have to be perfect. That's the other part of it.
100%. I'm a big advocate of the 80-20 rule.
Oh, there's my brother. Hi, Gare.
Oh, hey.
I think he's joining a little early, but I'll let him for something else, but that's okay. We have Passover tonight, and we're doing a virtual family Seder, so he might be setting it up for my parents or something.
Oh, nice.
Anyway, we'll just keep going.
Cool.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, you definitely don't have to
80-20.
be, you definitely don't have to be perfect. I teach 80-20, like strive for 100%, but pat yourself on the back if you get 80%, because that's probably good enough.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No sense in adding extra stress trying to be.
Exactly. Because that just ramps up your sympathetic drive.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
So should I get started with the presentation?
Yeah. Can you share your screen?
Yeah. Let's see here.
I'm going to mute myself because my dog is barking.
Okay. I should have had this ready. Here we go. So here we go, Primal Reboot Camp, parasympathetic activation. So in order to understand what parasympathetic activation is, we need to understand what the autonomic nervous system is. So I just got this simple definition from Wikipedia, and the autonomic nervous system is a control system, part of the larger nervous system that acts largely unconsciously and regulates bodily functions such as heart rate, digestion, respiratory rate, pupillary response, sexual arousal, and so on. And this is the primary mechanism. What Wikipedia puts in there is this is the primary mechanism in control of the fight or flight response. A lot of people have heard of fight or flight. The opposite side of that is what we call rest and digest. Fight or flight is sympathetic, and parasympathetic is rest and digest. So the sympathetic nervous system is, like I said earlier, what stimulates the body's fight, flight, or freeze response. A lot of people have added the freeze to the fight or flight. And if you've ever seen an animal encounter a predator in the wild, you will recognize fight, flight, or freeze, right? So the animal would either, if they know they're outmatched, they're about to get eaten, they're either going to run, so flight, they're going to bare their teeth and stand up and fight, or they're going to act dead and see if the predator would just leave them alone if they act dead. And this response system is in all mammals. It's in us as well. And the sympathetic and parasympathetic work in tandem to kind of help us maintain homeostasis. and we need both. And as I said, the parasympathetic system is also often referred to as rest and digest, or feed and breed. And then the parasympathetic, you need parasympathetic activation for a lot of things to maintain health, things like digestion, sexual arousal, even just urination and defecation. If you're in a constant state of fight or flight, you can't do these normal routine bodily functions that keep you in a state of well-being. So as I mentioned, I have a health coaching certificate from the Primal Health Coach Institute, and a lot of times the basic question we end up asking a lot is, what happens in nature? We kind of look to nature as our guide. So in nature, most animals are parasympathetic about 95% of the time, and sympathetic about 5% of the time. And this varies, right? So if you're a small little creature that is being threatened by predators a lot, you're probably going to be in sympathetic more often. But if you're an apex predator, like this lion here, you're basically going to be in sympathetic only for hunting or any other type of survival situation, which for an apex predator, like lions and humans, is not very much.
Although, yeah, I'm sure you're going to get to that. It's, our current climate and the way we live in general, even outside of the coronavirus issues,
Yes.
We are fighting for survival pretty much all the time, or at least our body.
Yes, absolutely. I have a slide that I'll be eager for your response on that.
Yeah.
So what happened? So what did this look like for early humans, right? So this picture on the left here this is an actual picture of the Hadza in Africa. It's one of the last remaining hunter-gatherer tribes, and they spend most of their time hanging out in their near their huts, near a fire, telling stories, dancing, enjoying one another, loving on each other, hugging each other, and generally being parasympathetic. The other 5% of the time, especially for early man, was pretty grueling, right? It was fighting predators, starving, trying to chase down small animals and to capture for food and stuff like that. So this is what it used to look like. Lots of rest. And then the stressful times were like incredibly stressful, fighting wild animals and stuff. So what does this look like today? Right? Well, today we face no existential threats like being eaten by a bear, but we are constantly faced with lots of low-level stress. And how does this affect us? Well, I haven't actually seen, this is actually my representation. I'll be curious to see what actually thinks about this, but I think this is how it affects us. I think that our normal, I think it changes the definition of stress, like I have up here. Our normal stress level, right? 0 would be like you're sleeping like a baby, have nothing to worry about. And 100 would be you're being eaten by another animal. And what I think modern life does to us is we now have like the most stressful thing that happens to us is way down here next to sleeping, and it really shrinks the area of comfort that we're familiar with operating in, right? So we basically today, we never experience anything that's way over here to the right, like being eaten by a lion. And so our familiar is that traffic, deadlines at work, bills, fights with your spouse, with your kids, like all of those things kind of max out our stress level, and then that becomes the most stressful thing that you experience, and that's what your body ends up responding to, because it thinks like in its global experience of what stress is, that's the most stressful thing that you have. So you just stay kind of pegged in this low level stress all the time. Does that match with what you were thinking, Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's man-made stress, like the phone going off constantly, the texting, the emails that you need to return, the bills you need to pay, and all those, which does add up. And I would also alter it a bit to add like trauma, and people living in violent situations, they probably are feeling it all, but like.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes, if you're in an abusive relationship, either physically or emotionally, yeah, you're probably somewhere way further to the right over here.
Yeah,
that's a good point. So the solution to this is find ways to provide more parasympathetic activation, and then try to tamp down our sympathetic activation. So how do you do that? Reduce stress, reduce our perception of stress, because a lot of times, that's kind of what I was trying to show in the slide before, right? You're sitting in traffic, you're going to be late for dinner. That is stressful, but in the bigger context of what stress is, it's not that stressful. And then the last piece, increase relaxation. So reducing stress. One of the biggest things I found that can help reduce stress is cut out the mouth breathing. So mouth breathing tends to be very shallow, and a lot of the nerves in the upper part of the lungs help trigger the sympathetic nervous system and kind of keeps us in this low-grade chronic state of sympathetic response. And that was something I was definitely doing before I started my health journey. Chronic cardio. Chronic cardio is what I would call people who train at a really high intensity for a long period of time chronically. So our hunter-gatherer ancestors, they may have been out hunting and gathering all day when they needed food, but this was at a very low level of aerobic activity, not anaerobic activity. And we know that if your heart rate goes over your aerobic threshold, that this also triggers the sympathetic nervous system. So the trap that a lot of people get into, a lot of exercisers, seemingly healthy people get into, is they say, okay, well, I've got to do my 1 hour workout today, my Zumba class, my aerobics, my Orange Theory, running, whatever it is, cycling. And so they're convinced that they got to go out there. They've been sitting all day, and they got to go out there and hammer it hard for an hour or 90 minutes. And they're training at an intensity level that's too high, and they're keeping their heart rate high, getting them into a sympathetic state. They're going anaerobic, which is also burning sugar. Burning sugars also stimulates the parasympathetic nerves, or the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. And if you think about it, if back when we were hunter-gatherers, the only time that we really needed this anaerobic energy supplies if we were doing something like hunting or running away from a predator. most of the other time we were doing this very low intensity, walking for miles, looking for food, foraging, stuff like that. So what happens when you go out and hammer it hard for an hour, 90 minutes at an anaerobic heart rate, you're not only keeping, telling your body we're gonna be in sympathetic, you also deplete your blood sugar. And the blood sugar dropping, bottoming out, also sends a sympathetic signal to your body to say, hey, this is our emergency fuel supply. You need to refuel that quick. And then you get all these cravings and hunger for, usually for foods that aren't that good for you, to refuel that, the blood sugar. So this is it's a very insidious cycle. I was definitely caught in it. A lot of people that want to lose weight get caught in this, and it's kind of this vicious cycle of chronic sympathetic stimulation. The way to get away from that is super boring, but it's to learn how to train at an aerobic pace, which is, generally speaking, about 180 minus your age will keep you, as far as heart rate, will keep you in an aerobic state and keep you from stimulating sympathetic. Avoiding processed foods. I had mentioned to Ashley earlier that in my journey, I really noticed that cutting out processed foods like wheats and grains especially really helped to eliminate sensitivity to allergens and other things. I think that the processed foods really kept my body in a state of high alert. And one of the reasons that this happens is gluten. Even if you're not diagnosed with with celiac or gluten insensitivity or gluten sensitivity, studies show that gluten in all people loosens our the cell junctions in our gut lining, and this allows food to get into your thoracic cavity and activate your immune response, and that would also keep us in a state of heightened sympathetic activity. A big one, I think, is poor sleep hygiene, and I would lump into that with that EMF exposure and blue light exposure. The poor sleep and blue light and EMF stands for electromagnetic frequencies. That's things like cell phones, Wi-Fi routers, Bluetooth, stuff like that. We know from what's called the dawn phenomenon that when you wake up in the morning and you see the dawn, the most amount of blue light and sunlight occurs in the morning, and that's supposed to wake you up. And part of what that does, that blue light does, is it increases cortisol and increases blood sugar. And this is a evolutionary response to waking up in the morning and seeing the sun and getting your day going. But today we have screens and phones and laptops and TVs and indoor lighting all have 4 times more blue light than morning sunlight, which is constantly cranking out the cortisol and the raising blood sugar and lowering melatonin, which is parasympathetic activating. And most people know melatonin is the sleep hormone. So if you don't have enough sleep hormone, you're not going to sleep well. And then you're going to get up in the morning and start the cycle all over again of elevated cortisol and elevated blood sugar. And there's a whole other host of hormones that get completely out of whack when your circadian rhythm gets messed up. And then another thing that adds to sympathetic activation is worry and rumination. And I think as a society, we kind of nurture the habit of worrying and ruminating about things a little bit too much. And so if you can do anything to mitigate that, which I have some suggestions later on, that's also really good. And then having a sedentary lifestyle is also not very conducive to parasympathetic activation. So perception of stress, how to change that a little bit. So I said earlier, I didn't like chronic cardio. What I would put in here is aerobic exercise. And how that differs is, like I said, keeping your heart rate below 180 minus your age. And aerobic, when you can provide this slight hormetic stress, not a acute stress like maxing out your heart rate for an hour, but when you provide this kind of low intensity hormetic stress, it helps widen the definition of what your body thinks of as stress. So if you can get your aerobic system to be super efficient and you're able to do something like, I don't know, run 7-minute miles and stay in an aerobic state, that really kind of widens your body's definition of stress and will keep you in parasympathetic more often. And then I have the opposite of that right underneath that, high intensity interval training exercise. Now, a lot of people I think do this wrong, and it turns into chronic cardio, right? So true high aerobic or high intensity interval training should only be about 20 minutes. So if you're doing it longer than 20 minutes, then it turns into something that's more sympathetic activating. And actually, not all sympathetic activation is bad. And the reason I like HIIT training is because it provides just enough sympathetic activation that it lets your body realize that once it's done, we can go back to parasympathetic. It kind of gives you this rebound effect and gets you kind of deeper into parasympathetic than you would have been if you hadn't done the exercise. Learning, stepping outside your comfort zone, trying new things, which is something everyone's talking about now during the COVID-19. But just learning new things, doing new things, trying things you haven't done before, even doing stuff like brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand, helps that adaptation response and helps you realize, hey, this, just because something is new doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have a stressful response. Cold showers and ice baths. These are two of my favorites. A lot of people do not like them, but I am absolutely convinced that the ice baths in particular really kind of widen that perception of what stress is. So if you remember back to the slide that I had with the traffic way over on the left and the lion way over on the right, the cold bath is definitely going to be to the right of the traffic. And it is a slightly stressful event. And if you can train yourself not to perceive the ice bath as something quite so stressful. I mean, it's quite a statement to society, I think, today, when you mention this to people and they literally would rather, like, you know, I don't know, get poked with a needle than take an ice bath. And in my own personal journey, I had friends telling me that I needed to do these ice baths. And I was like, no, I'm good. I'll do the diet. I'll change my sleep, but not doing ice baths. Don't need that. And I was actually watching a documentary on PBS about a moose and her calf being hunted by a wolf. And they were running through the mountains, snow on the ground everywhere. They came up to this river and they jumped right in. Didn't hesitate, didn't stop for not even a fraction of a second, just jumped right in trying to get away from that wolf. And it hit me that the cold water for them, it's just part of the environment. There's nothing special about it. It's nothing stressful at all. It's just part of the environment. And we, through our comfort, have really reduced our tolerance for stress quite a bit because we're comfortable all the time. So I think doing things like ice baths and sauna and fasting, which most people don't do any of the three, right? Most of the time we're sitting in our air-conditioned or heated home. If we go to work, we go into our air-conditioned heated car and then get into our air-conditioned heated house or work office. And man, hardly anybody ever misses a meal. And I think building in practices like this really helps make you more resilient, and it helps your body learn what true stress really is.
Now, would you recommend, with a caveat, I don't think people should be doing all three at the same, like fasting and doing sauna, and I mean, you could like,
you can build
careful
up to it. Yeah.
Moderation.
Yes.
Like careful, because you can pass out from.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I certainly didn't mean to start tomorrow doing all three.
Yeah, maybe try one the next day, 2 days, try another,
Yeah.
I know some people go from the hot to cold, and that's supposed to be good. I don't know. I hate cold. I'm always cold. So for me, it's like, that's not fun. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's added a lot to my life. I take a cold shower every morning. What really kind of sealed the deal for me in doing it was I was trying to build this habit, and after 2 or 3 days I said, if I'm not prepared to just stand under a little bit of cold water, what am I really prepared to do today? And ever since then I haven't had a problem with it. So increased relaxation, adding healthy habits. Like I mentioned earlier, nose breathing really helps activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Nose breathing increases nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator, makes your blood pressure a little bit lower, and just generally helps activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And I have here put a sticky note. I had to do this when I first started doing this. I was such a chronic mouth breather that I had to put a sticky note on my monitor to remind myself to breathe through my mouth. Some people get really aggressive with it and even tape their mouth shut while they're working. If you don't have to talk to anybody, I guess you could do that. I actually tape my mouth at night when I sleep, because once I started realizing all this, I noticed that I was definitely a mouth breather while I was sleeping, and so I tape my mouth shut now at night, and I get deeper sleep, better sleep, for sure. Diaphragmatic breathing. So if you're not familiar with what that is, that's actually using the diaphragm, which is the muscle that we should be using to breathe, which is in the thoracic cavity, as opposed to only using your chest and your neck muscles to breathe, which if you're doing a lot of shallow mouth breathing, odds are you probably are just breathing shallow in your chest. And there's actually nerve endings deeper in the lungs that activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And there's nerve endings in the upper chest, upper lungs that activate the sympathetic nervous system. And if you really look into breathing, there's all kinds of exercises that you can do to activate either one or the other. You can actually activate quite a bit of adrenaline doing hyperventilating, chest breathing only. But if you want to activate parasympathetic and get into a restful, calm state, then you want to do the deep diaphragmatic breathing. Mindfulness and meditation. There's all been tons of studies that link mindfulness and meditation to lower cortisol, lower blood pressure, lower heart rate, better digestion, and other homeostatic activities. And believe it or not, I don't know which study actually did this, but they measured that mindfulness and meditation relaxes the sphincter muscles. So if you're a tight ass, you should do mindfulness and meditation. Massage.
I agree.
Massage, hugs, and touch. So all of these things, skin-on-skin contact with other people releases oxytocin. And oxytocin is it a hormone or a neurotransmitter? Neurotransmitter? Hormone.
Hormone.
Okay. And that hormone regulates fear, aggression, perception of pain, and it increases feelings of calm and well-being. You also get oxytocin from sex and intimacy. And if you think about the state that you'd need to be in to reproduce as an early hunter-gatherer, you'd need to be in a parasympathetic state, resting and digesting, not in a crisis state. And this is actually quite a big deal for a lot of people that can't get into the parasympathetic state, so they cannot initiate sex and intimacy. The reason I have sex and intimacy as a separate bullet here is because the orgasm is actually a sympathetic response, and it allows you to kind of have that rebound effect, like I was talking with the high intensity training, where you are in this parasympathetic state and you increase the stress until you have the orgasm. And then having that sympathetic response actually allows you to rebound and go deeper into parasympathetics. And that's why people usually sleep really well after they have sex. Foam rolling and stretching. I've always heard that these activate parasympathetic. I actually found very little hard evidence that that's the case. I went ahead and put them in here because I know that when I do them, they feel really good. And I do think that foam rolling and stretching before I sleep helps me sleep a little bit. Yoga. Yoga is another one of those things that gives you a little rebound off a sympathetic response so that it allows you to get deeper into parasympathetic. A lot of people go to yoga and they think that the whole goal of the yoga is to do the poses better and to be able to like bend into a pretzel and put your leg over your head. And if you're not doing those things, you're just bad at yoga. But the real whole point of yoga is the final shavasana at the end, right? And the way that yoga makes you relax, and the reason that you feel so great when you leave yoga is because you spend an hour or more building the tension and increasing the sympathetic activation. Usually, and if the yoga instructor does the class right, usually it's increasing intensity, right? To where the end, you're doing something really crazy like a handstand or something. And then immediately after that, you go into final shavasana, and it's the signal for the body that you can return to parasympathetic, and you usually get to a deeper parasympathetic state than when you started. Um, infrared light, there's also a lot of evidence that stimulates parasympathetic system. Sun exposure in nature. Sun also increases nitric oxide production and vasodilates and sets your circadian rhythm and tons of other things. I'm a big advocate of sun exposure. Not mindless sun worshiping, but sun exposure at the proper times in the morning. I like to see the sun within an hour of sunrise, and then I like to get some sun in the midday. And high vitamin D is also associated with pretty much every positive health outcome you can think of. This is another reason I advocate sun exposure.
Including it may prevent or have better outcomes with the current coronavirus.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But we don't know for sure, and that's just a hypothesis at this point.
Yeah.
And just disclaimer.
Yeah. And I've already mentioned sleep. I think this is a big one for people. If you are not, during this time when our schedules are all thrown off, if you are not regulating your sleep and keeping a consistent sleep schedule, that's one thing that you can do to really help yourself get better autonomic regulation. And then my favorite one is there's lots of studies that say that dark chocolate increases.
That's my favorite too.
And I'm ready to go. As soon as we're done, I'm going to activate some parasympathetic.
Awesome. Oh, I love that brand. I get the 88 or 80% one sometimes.
Yeah.
So that one's good.
Yeah. And that's all I got.
That was awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So when you work with someone, is it one-on-one or in group sessions? What?
I have a 90-day course.
Okay.
And I can take, the smallest class I've done is 3. I'm not sure I'll do 3 again, but I could take anywhere from, up to 10, 12, 15 people.
And you literally for 3 months you're with them for you have these sessions, teaching sessions.
So I teach through Zoom as well, and it's one night a week. And we meet for an hour, sometimes a little longer. Depends on how many questions and how interested people are.
Okay.
And then I give homework for the remainder of the week.
Gotcha.
And then we spend the next class, first 20 minutes going over the homework, answering questions, and then we spend the next 45 minutes covering the new material.
Okay. Cool.
And so it's 90 days, but it really comes out to 12 weeks.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. And the first 7 weeks are diet and nutrition. And then the remainder is other lifestyle things like movement and mindfulness, meditation, sleep and circadian rhythm.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. I love that. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's really fun. I enjoy teaching it. I really like it a lot.
Yeah. And do they build a sense of community as well?
So right now I'm finishing up my class of 3. Next week is their last class. And it's kind of interesting. I have some online tools like Slack and Zoom and stuff to facilitate more community sharing and stuff. But when there's only 3 people, there's not, it's like a lot easier to just like email 3 people.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that. Okay, cool. So just again, if your website is
primalrebootcamp.com.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, thanks so much for getting us educated on the parasympathetic activation. I loved all the tips and, the mouth breathing. That's kind of a newer one for me. I haven't heard
Oh
that.
yeah.
Taping of the mouth. Yeah. I mean, I know about like sleep apnea, obviously, but that I haven't heard of that one. So thanks for letting me know.
Absolutely.
Do you use any blue light computer programs? I know about F-Flux.
I do, yes. So I use an app called Iris, and I like Iris better than F-Flux because it also dampens the flicker.
Okay.
So F-Flux doesn't eliminate flicker, and apparently flicker is also very...
I'm not familiar with flicker. What is flicker? Like other than...
So your screen, every computer screen has what they call a refresh rate. And so if you filmed a computer screen,
okay,
and you see the lines going down, right? Like every row of your pixels is refreshing every millisecond.
Oh,
you know, whatever.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and so that in itself apparently adds a little stress. And so Iris eliminates the flicker, which helps reduce stress a little more. And it also
Iris
has
Health, or
it's called if the website is called iristech.co, I believe.
There's the first thing that comes up is Iris dating app. Tech. Here we go. Iris technology.
Yep. Iris. Yep.
I'm not on the iPhone, in the App Store.
Oh yes.
It's not there.
Yeah. So Apple does not like, they want the display to work how they want the display to work. And so they don't allow the app in the Apple Store. You can actually download it from the Iris website.
Gotcha.
And hook your phone up to your computer and install it that way.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll try it out.
Yeah. Let me, if you got time, let me share my screen again real quick, and I can show you what the Iris, I have it on now. Let's see here. But there's a couple different settings. And you can set it to this night setting, and it's crazy dark.
Yeah. I used to have the night setting on my phone, and everyone always asks me, why is it so dark? And I'm like, well, because I don't want that stimulation all the time. But I don't know I think I changed it.
So I turned it off during the presentation just because a lot of times people ask questions, but you can see how much darker my screen is now.
In the back, you mean?
Even the white of the presentation.
Oh.
So there's with it off.
Then
there's with it on. Now this is the daytime setting. And then you can actually set it to sleep, and it's like crazy. Okay.
It didn't really change on our end, but...
Oh, it didn't?
Maybe because it's a screen share, and it's just, I don't know. Weird.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. It probably... Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. I love it.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get to meet in person at some point.
Yeah, I'm hoping that this experience that we're all living through at the moment will lead to a little bit more flexible work environment for me, since we now know everybody can work from home. Right.
Not go into that sympathetic inducing traffic, and it saves the environment,
Big time.
So yeah. I like it.
Me too.
All right. Well, thanks so much. I'll put this up on the AWC YouTube channel and post it in the group, and on our public Facebook page. Don't forget to check them all out. AustinWellnessCollaborative.org is our website, and we're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and that's about it. That's enough. Yeah. All
Okay.
right. Well, everyone have a great weekend. Happy Passover, happy Easter, happy spring, happy all the things, and stay well.
Thanks.
Bye.